Today we have a list of 5 of the motorcycles in history that have had the longest production runs. And this idea is coming from our friends over at Jalopnik. They put together a really cool list as an article, so we decided to add a little bit more information, make a video to talk about this same thing, because there are several motorcycles on the market that have nameplates that go back beyond decades, almost 100 years for the bike that's in number 1. For number 5 on this list, where we're starting out, this is a motorcycle that'll be a little less familiar to people here in the North American market, but very familiar to people all over Southeast Asia. This is the Honda CG125. It's a motorcycle that's been around since 1976. And one of the reasons that it's stayed around for so long and been so popular is because it's a small displacement commuter bike. So, like I said, in Southeast Asia, this is an extremely popular motorcycle type in markets where people are using bikes more for actual commuting and dailying and less so as a toy, like what a lot of us here in the States use them as. And this motorcycle was initially developed from a CB125, but the idea was to make this very simple and easy to run for a long, long time with minimal maintenance. So this is a pushrod motor, generally requires a little bit less repair. It's definitely not a powerhouse of a bike, around 11 horsepower, and it weighs about 230 pounds, so it's definitely a very lightweight motorcycle. But these bikes are still in production and still apparently pretty popular to this day. For number 4 on this list, this is a motorcycle that's much more familiar to us because it's much more American. And it's the Harley-Davidson, specifically the FL Electroglides. Electroglide is a name that's been around for a very long time, since 1965. And that name was initially given when electric start came to these motorcycles, if that gives you an idea for how long the Electroglide name has been around. Now, these bikes went to shovel heads in 1966, and the iconic Batwing fairing came around in 1969. And to this day, you can still go out and buy a Harley-Davidson Street Glide with that same Batwing fairing. So these Electroglides' direct descendants are still on the market now, even though the Electroglide isn't around in dealerships as of 2025. But the Street Glide and the Road Glide are fantastic motorcycles, and they have developed so much over the years, even in the last 15, 20 years. The brand new bikes that came out just a couple of years ago ride fantastic. They actually handle really well, if you can believe it. Fit and finish on them is fantastic. So as much as they look like what they used to look like, in some ways at least, even back in the 60s, they've developed a ton in terms of engineering, performance. They are much better bikes than they used to be, and they're the perfect bikes to go cross-country on. So some of my favorites out there. At this point, you can get one with a 12.3-inch screen with Apple CarPlay, which is pretty crazy. For number 3 on our list is once again the iconic Honda Super Cub. This is a motorcycle that we talked about in last week's list video, and it's a hard motorcycle to avoid in any list because it's one of the most iconic bikes of all time, and it's been around since 1958. Right around the time that Honda started selling here in the States, when American Honda was established. And this is, like we said, and have said many times in the past, the best-selling motor vehicle ever. Over 100 million sold as of 2017, and many more sold since then. And the reason is simplicity, reliability, and it's very user-friendly. Just about anybody can jump on a Honda Super Cub and make their way down the street with pretty minimal training. They're very easy motorcycles to get on and ride, and like I said, very easy motorcycles to maintain and keep on the road. And these bikes also introduced the iconic ad campaign, "You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda," which is one of the most famous ad campaigns in all of history, and one of the things that popularized not only Honda, but motorcycling for the masses here in the US. The Beach Boys even had a song called Little Honda that was about the Super Cub, so these are great bikes. For number 2 on the list, the Harley-Davidson Sportster. That's been around since 1957, so even just slightly longer than the Super Cub, and it's a nameplate that you can still go out and buy today. The Sportster is a staple of Harley-Davidson's lineup, one of arguably the more entry-level bikes. It's a little bit more compact, a little bit more lightweight. The Evo engine Harleys, very popular and had been around for a very long time, up until 2022. And those were awesome motorcycles. I owned one myself and spent a lot of time on it. But nowadays, the Sportster has gone somewhere a little different. It's definitely one of the more sophisticated bikes in Harley-Davidson's lineup, especially if you get a Sportster S with that big bad 1250 Revolution Max V-twin with 121 horsepower. It's dual overhead cam, variable valve timing, liquid cooled. I get it, doesn't really sound like the traditional Harley, so it might not make the noises that everybody wants, but it certainly has all of the performance that you could ask for out of these bikes. If you get onto a Sportster S, even coming off of a sport bike, something else pretty fast, and you go twist the grip to full throttle in sport mode, hold on, because these motorcycles are not only fast in the top end, but they're torquey as well. The Sportster has also come a really long way since 1957, but it is an absolutely iconic name that's been around for a long time and for good reason. And number one on this list is the Royal Enfield Bullet. That beats all of these other nameplates by quite a bit because the Bullet's been around since 1932. So that is a very old nameplate. And the original bikes were either a 350 or a 500 initially. Later on, they came out with a 250 model. These bikes were even used by the RAF in World War II. So it's not only old in name, but even in design, because a brand new Royal Enfield Bullet still looks a lot like many of the bikes that were its predecessors. You can see the heritage in it, even though they've, of course, changed a lot over the years. And the new model has ABS on the front. It's fuel injected. It's more sophisticated, but it's not incredibly sophisticated because it's actually a little old school in its design as well. Some very basic versions of these bikes that are still recently produced have kickstarters. It is air-cooled, single cylinder. It's a 5-speed. So this is actually, it's not just a retro-looking bike. It's still pretty simple in its engineering and design. But the fact that they've been making this Royal Enfield Bullet for coming up on 100 years, we're almost to that point in just a few extra years. It'll be the 100th anniversary of the Royal Enfield Bullet. That's a pretty big achievement and really cool. Now, of course, there's lots of other motorcycles that have been on the market for a very long time, some of which have been through very minimal changes over their lifespans. And these are some of the bikes whose nameplates have been around for the longest, even though they've changed a lot over that time. Now, I also want to say a quick thanks to Scott and the team over at Rider Justice, because he does something really useful for people out there in the motorcycle world. If you're ever in an incident, and we hope you never are, but it happens, Scott and the team will represent motorcyclists, and it's not just something that they do because it's their job, but it's something they do because they're very passionate about it, because Scott is a motorcycle rider as well. He's got some really cool bikes of his own, and he 100% understands where motorcyclists are coming from. And though they're based here in Colorado, they work with people all over the country. So if you need representation, check them out using the link below. Now, of all the motorcycles on this list, there are a few that we haven't ridden. We haven't ridden the Royal Enfield Bullet. We do have a Royal Enfield Himalayan, and I've gotten a chance to ride the Continental. Would like to get on some more, so the next time I'm at a Royal Enfield dealer, I might try and do a video with the Bullet. And I also haven't ridden that Electroglide from a couple years ago, which is a bike that I would actually consider buying. So there's a lot of really cool motorcycles on this list, but let me know in the comments below if there's some other motorcycles that have been around for a really long time that we didn't talk about that you would like us to mention and potentially shoot a video with at some point in the future. That's all for this video. I hope it's warmer where you are than it is where I am right now, and you can still be out there riding. We'll see you next time.